And the Emmy goes to Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
We went into it with no experience in television whatsoever.
It's very different from anything that's been done.
It really was my first job. I did not know what Hollywood was.
I want to have giant battles, incredible castle, dragons and dire wolves and mammoths and a wall of ice that's 700 feet tall. I'm writing a novel here. It's never going to be filmed.
I was so desperately unemployed. I did not know what Hollywood was.
When Emilia Clarke auditioned for Game of Thrones in 2010, her only real acting experience was from one TV episode, one TV movie, and a lot of failed auditions.
But can't you see? He would never touch you.
Bet.
You are beneath him.
He would never touch you.
Bet.
You are beneath him.
I've thought many times, maybe I'll just give up acting, and I can't. I just can't do it.
Do you remember the audition for this show?
I do. Yes, I do. There was a lot of adrenaline, I was very nervous, and there were lots of people from HBO there and did all of the scenes, and at the end, I was asking them if I could do anything else. And David Benioff suggested I do a dance. Ha ha ha. And so I did.
Oh no.
I don't know how to do it, but I did the funky chicken. And I kind of morphed into the robot. I heard some laughter going on, and I thought, comedy gold, this is brilliant.
Your reign is over.
My reign has just begun.
Seeing her journey is a phenomenal experience, and as a young girl myself, I think it sort of empowers me as a woman. Even the remotest possibility that I've helped to make other women feel empowered is just the most wonderful feeling.
I haven't given you permission to leave.
With respect, Your Grace, I don't need your permission.
With Jon Snow, I had an image in my mind of not only what he should look like, but more what he should kind of feel like, a certain brooding intensity and a kind of haunted thing.
I was very fresh. I was fresh off the boat from drama school. And essentially they were auditioning every young Brit in the UK. And for whatever reason, the producers, they sort of spotted me and said, this guy looks upset enough to play Jon Snow.
The first time Kit walked into the room, I remember thinking, oh, please let this guy be good.
Do you remember the audition for Jon Snow? I had a black eye. I'd been in a fight the night before with this guy in McDonald's. I went into the McDonald's and with this girl I was sort of dating at the time, and it was late at night and there was no seats. I asked this guy and this girl he was with if we could sit on the same table as them, and they said yes. We sat down and quite quickly he started being really rude to the girl I was with, calling her names, and I got up and said, no, you can't call her that, get up. So I called him up for a fight, which I'd never done before. And of course he'd been sat down the whole time, so he got up and he just kept going. And I realised that I had to, at that point, throw the first punch, otherwise I looked like a complete wimp. And I got battered. So then I went to the Jon Snow audition with a black eye.
So he came in and he nailed it. I mean, he was incredible.
I think that man who punched me in the face may have helped me get the job, so if you're watching, thank you.
What drew me to the character is he's just badass with a sword.
He's pretty much one of the only good guys in the story. That's a nice thing to play.
You're Tyrion Lannister, the Queen's brother.
My greatest accomplishment.
For Tyrion, Peter Dinklage. That was the one role where we didn't audition anybody, we didn't read anybody.
When I first heard they were interested in me for a fantasy show, I went, ugh, no. When clinically what you are has become sort of poached by the fantasy world as a term for somebody who's not human. What you see is a dwarf. Like a gnome or an ogre or whatever else. There's a fairy, pixie, leprechaun, elf, everything. But therefore, when you do that, you're clipping.
Dinklage didn't want to be clipped, or in other words, reduced to a fantasy stereotype.
One of the biggest actors in this town, Peter.
What is that, a play on words or something, dickhead?
I've met Peter before at a dinner or something or other, and he ignored me.
I tolerate agents. I don't like them.
But I remember thinking he's really smart, he's very funny. You'd already heard about the books and the character, I think. And then we met, and do you remember what you said? You had one demand.
No beards. No long beards. I just never understood why in fantasy dwarves always have beards. No offense to Mr. Tolkien.
So I knew I'd going into something interesting, but I was honest with them, and then they just sort of let me have my day in court in the meeting. And then they went, well, that's good news because Tyrion is, and then they explained the character. And I was hooked.
The Lady of Winterfell has a nice ring to it.
So does Hand of the Queen.
Because these kids aren't supposed to be little cute Hollywood types, and you have them audition with a few different scenes, but you don't know if they're gonna be able to handle all this in front of cameras and crew of hundreds, and with all the pressure that comes with one of our shooting days.
I don't care. I'm going out riding.
We must have seen, how many? We must have seen 300 Arias. Nobody was right. There were a couple of kids who felt very actory, who felt like they'd kind of gone through that child actor processing machine. Nobody had that realness we were looking for. And one of the very last faces we saw was Maisie's face.
On my audition day, I had like a hole in my leggings and I was like trying to cover it with my hand while I was doing my scene. And like Aria is just known for like being scruffy.
I'm not. I'm running a tube lighter. We're going to Peruvies.
I guess like I learned very early on that like the strange things about you are what make you like unique and what make you like perfect for something.
So perfect. It was literally 10 seconds into the audition, we were like, yep, she's the one.
I don't care. I'm going out riding.
Oh, God, to be true, Aria. Sometimes you act like such a child.
We had already hired Maisie, I guess.
I hadn't read the script. I didn't know what any of it meant. I didn't even know what kind of show it was.
We made Maisie read with Sophie as a chemistry read.
I hate riding. All it does is get you soiled and dusty and sore. Anyway, you're not supposed to leave the column anymore. Father said so.
Father said so.
This was a sisterly anti-chemistry because they didn't like each other at all. And just knowing that was it, that was already on top of it.
I'm Sophie Turner and I play Sansa Stark. I learned how to act on that show in front of millions of people. It was really embarrassing.
You go back and you watch Maisie and Sophie in the first season, and they were just little kids, you know. Maisie looked like she was 7 years old when we started shooting, and now she's this amazing woman.
I've just got this confidence from playing Aria.
I was a hot young writer for quite a long time. Each novel got a bigger advance and more publicity and more awards until I wrote the Armageddon rag and nobody bought it. Suddenly I found no one wanted my books anymore. But oddly enough, the very book that ended my career as a novelist opened my career in Hollywood. The guy who optioned it for film, he was the same guy who CBS picked to revive The Twilight Zone. He called me up and said, hey, you want to write a Twilight Zone script for us? So suddenly I found myself being a television writer. I was constantly getting the refrain after I turned in a script. This is great, but it would take 5 times our budget to do it. Could you please go back? Could you please eliminate like 12 of these characters? And you know, this big battle, could that be a duel between the hero and the villain? But after 10 years of doing that, I was sick of doing that. I want something huge and epic that can stand up there with Tolkien. I want people emotionally involved in my story and not knowing who's going to win, who's going to die. I mean, we all know books and movies where, you know, the hero may seem to be in deep trouble, but you know he's going to get out of it because, after all, he's the hero. When I went to write Game of Thrones, I said, oh, the hell with it. I'm just going to let it all hang out. I'm going to write something as big as my imagination. I'm writing a novel here. It's never going to be filmed.
But Hollywood thought otherwise.
I started getting interest from Hollywood, from various producers and studios who were initially interested in doing it as a feature film. People I met with from movies said one of two things. They either said, oh, we'll just make the first movie, and then after that's a hit, then we'll make more. Or alternatively, they said, well, we have to find, yes, it's true, it's too complex, it's too big the way it is, but we have to find the central arc. And we've decided the central arc is Jon Snow. The whole movie will be about Jon Snow, or the central arc is Daenerys. The whole movie will be about this exiled princess and she gives birth to dragons. That might be a good movie. That would be interesting, but it wouldn't be my story.
I started reading George's, the first book, A Game of Thrones. I got about 200 pages into it. I got to the scene where Bran gets pushed out of the tower window.
The things I do for love.
I called Dan and said, you need to check out these books because I might be crazy, but I think this could be the greatest series of all time.
I sat there in my chair and I didn't move, and my now wife, then girlfriend, was wondering why I wasn't moving and I wasn't bathing. I read 900 pages in 2 days, which I hadn't done probably since I was 12 years old.
I decided the only way it could be done was with someone like HBO as a series of television series. I did tell this idea to my agent, and I was out here in Hollywood on something, and he told me he had set up a meeting with these guys, Benioff and Weiss.
We took him out for lunch, and he was sitting there kind of looking between the two of us, and he said, who was Jon Snow's mother? And it was a test question.
Weirdly, we had both talked about it because we'd read the book again by that point. And when you read it a second time, if you're paying attention, you can kind of tell who Jon Snow's mother is.
You've never been a bastard.
And it would turned out to be the right answer.
At the end of it, I said, okay, yeah, I'll give it to you. Go take it into HBO and run with it. Epic fantasy, ever since Tolkien, really, has been hitting the bestseller lists and performing very strongly as books, but not so much in television. And when they did tackle it, they treated it as a kid's fare, something for 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, very safe, playful.
Before Game of Thrones, most TV execs saw fantasy as niche escapism, not prestige drama. To convince them, Benioff and Weiss focused on the book's more adult themes.
When we first pitched the show to HBO, that was part of the pitch, was that this is a show, it's a fantasy show, but it's not Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is wonderful, but I don't think any of the hobbits ever got a boner. It's set in a fantasy world, but these are supposed to be humans, and they're supposed to be real people who are obsessed with the things that real people are obsessed with, including sex.
Did you pull a knife on me in the night?
This is a world where it's not humans against orcs, it's humans against humans and doing horrible things to each other. And that was part of our initial pitch.
HBO had enough faith to redefine the fantasy genre.
But getting the show greenlit was far from guaranteed, especially given the problems with the pilot.
We'd shot a pilot, and there were a lot of things that, frankly, we didn't do right the first time out.
We went into it with no experience in television whatsoever and made a tremendous number of mistakes.
The pilot was almost entirely reshot because we learned it was a very difficult sort of a hybrid between film and television.
If you remember, at the end of the pilot, Cersei and Jaime Lannister, who are twins, are having sex. And it's supposed to be kind of a shock because they're twins. And so we showed the episode to 3 of our good friends who are writers, very smart people. And at the very end, we looked at them and said, okay, what do you got? And they're kind of looking at each other, they're kind of embarrassed. And one of them said, are those 2 blondes? Are they related in some way? They didn't realize that they were brother and sister.
There wasn't ever any point at which you were told explicitly that,
so they incest, all that stuff gets lost, obviously.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of the scene, literally goes out the window.
The unaired pilot also featured a noticeably different cast, with Tamsin Merchant in the role of Daenerys and Jennifer Eel as Catelyn Stark.
For 3 or 4 months after we'd shot the initial pilot, it seemed 50-50 whether or not HBO would actually pick up the show.
They were not pleased at all, but they still felt that, we've already sunk $10 million into this, so let's take a shot at it.
Emilia Clarke replaced Tamsin Merchant as Daenerys, Michelle Fairley stepped in as Catelyn Stark, and many other fixes were made.
Despite all the problems with the pilot, we got a chance to go back and rewrite it and ended up reshooting. And unlike a feature where you're kind of screwed if when you test screen it, it's just a complete fiasco, we actually were able to rectify some of those problems.
But the one thing that was still a massive undertaking was making a faithful adaptation to the world Martin created.
All the worlds, all of them have to be very instantly recognizable. So you as audience members will go, oh, we must be in the Dothrakis. Oh, we must be in King's Landing.
We've got 700 crew members and a cast of, I think, 583 named characters. It really is a cast of thousands at this point. It gets very hectic. I mean, the scheduling process, the giant board that has the whole season schedule on it, it's frightening because it just doesn't seem possible that we'll get through the season.
We actually scouted about 17 different countries, and there was something about the look of Ireland. The book is based in part on British history, the War of the Roses and stuff. So it's set in a kind of world that just feels very much like Great Britain. We actually went on a scout in Northern Ireland, and the look was perfect. The forests and the stony beaches and the streams and the rolling hills, it just felt right.
We're shooting, in Belfast. We shot some in Scotland. We also shot in Iceland, in Spain. We've done a lot in Croatia, Morocco, and Malta.
Iceland is, I've said it many, many times, but it lends itself so brilliantly to filming. It's so beautiful.
I think we're probably the best looking show on television.
There's a problem now. The TV series has caught up with the novels, and George is nowhere near finishing the 6th volume.
George has his process, and if it takes him 20 years to finish the series, that's what it should take him. We can't rush him, and at the same time, we can't put the show on hiatus.
All they had to work with was outlines that Martin gave them, and by the final season, they were out of their depth.
Yes, I am concerned about the ending. I certainly hope that the ending will tie together, and hopefully it'll make some people happy.
While it made countless people the opposite of happy, at least the people who were a part of it were honest.
We had a table read though, and I was the one person who hadn't read the episodes. And they were looking at me to see my reactions as the events unfolded. And they got some pretty good reactions. I was very shocked and surprised at certain events unfolding, and then I blubbed my eyes out.
Have you shot your final scenes yet? And are you happy with how things ended?
Yeah.
She didn't say yes. You didn't say yes.
Best season ever!
I was underwhelmed. I thought after all they've been through, to decide by committee, we actually were all in agreement that it kind of went off like that. It didn't go out with a bang. It kind of, slipped away, which is a great pity.
While its final episodes had their moments, the show left behind a complicated legacy.
I think we knew it would be controversial. I think we hoped that it would be a little more 50-50. Definitely didn't want it to be quite so much hate.
For me, what I hope for is endurance, that people still watch it and think about it after it's done.
To me, it does endure. A ton of my favorite shows that I still consider legendary had considerable declines in quality. And as much as we wish Game of Thrones were in the rare air of those that crushed the landing, it's hard to deny the way it brought an epic fantasy to life and pushed the boundaries of TV forever. I'm Adam, this is ScreenPuff. If you liked this, check out this next video. And as always, thanks for watching.